Here's a story about a tortoise.
What's a tortoise?
That's a turtle. And a turtle walks ever so slow. In this story there is a hare.
What's a hare?
That's a rabbit. And a rabbit runs faster than a crow.
Now the rabbit was as fast as fast could be.
And the turtle was so slow, but he was wise.
And no one from the forest thought that they would ever see the turtle beat the rabbit right before their eyes.
Oh, the rabbit ran a mile, and then he would stop to rest.
And the turtle walked along without a stop.
When the rabbit climbed a hilltop, hippy-hop up to the crest, the turtle was walking on the other side. Oh, the rabbit stopped to eat, and the rabbit stopped to play.
And the turtle kept on walking on his merry way.
And the rabbit stopped to drink, and the rabbit stopped to sleep, saying, I can catch that lazy turtle with barely just a leap.
Then the rabbit rubbed his eyes, and he started in to run
right back to the place where they had begun. As the rabbit huffed and puffed to get across the finish line, the turtle sat there waiting and feeling oh so very fine. The rabbit was so fast, the turtle was so slow. The turtle beat the rabbit, he won the race, you know. Oh, the rabbit stopped to eat, and the rabbit stopped to play.
And the turtle kept on walking on his merry way.
And the rabbit stopped to drink, and the rabbit stopped to sleep, saying, I can catch that lazy turtle with barely just a leap.
Then the rabbit rubbed his eyes, and he started in to run
right back to the place where they had begun. As the rabbit huffed and puffed to get across the finish line, the turtle sat there waiting and saying, slow and steady wins the race.
Jack and the Beanstalk. Now Jack was just
a silly boy who somehow or another
exchanged his cow
for 6 small beans and ran home to his mother.
She threw the beans
into the yard and sent Jack off to bed.
And then she sat
right down and cried until her eyes were red.
Then Jack awoke at crack of dawn, right there before his eyes. A big, tremendous beanstalk grew, way up into the skies.
Then Jack ran out
into the yard as fast could be.
He climbed the stalk up to the top. Now guess what he could see?
Jack saw a castle close at hand. He knocked upon the door. The girl who answered easily was his height and 10 feet more. Jack said,
Please, ma'am, I'd like some food if even just one bite.
She said,
Be quick, before the giant comes home to spend the night.
But Jack had barely settled down to eat a piece of bread. The giant came home. Jack had to hide, and then the giant said,
3, 5, 4, fum, it seems I smell a boy.
It's not a boy. I've cooked a pig. Your dinner you'll enjoy.
And the giant ate his dinner and fell asleep playing with his purse full of money. As soon as he was asleep, Jack crept out from under the bed and quickly recognized the purse as one that had been stolen from his father many years before. So he took the purse and ran helter-skelter to the beanstalk and slid all the way down.
Jack's mother was glad to see him back. She told him about a gold hen the bad giant stole some years ago. Jack went up the beanstalk again. That night when the giant's meal was served, Jack hid himself back of some kegs. The giant then said, "Oh, golden hen, lay dozens of bright golden eggs."
The giant got tired and was snoring, and Jack, walking softly tiptoe, swept up the gold hen and went running. As he squeezed her, she started to crow. Jack knew that the giant heard the hen, and that soon he'd be wide awake. Jack slid down the beanstalk, took an axe. The beanstalk fell down with a shake.
The giant fell to the ground with a horrible sound and kept falling through the night, 'cause he fell in a hole and just like a mole, when so deep he fell from sight.
Now Mother and Jack had their hen back. They spent their life happy and gay. And the giant's wife, one hears, spent the next 20 years
just singing and dancing each day.
Red Riding Hood, Red Riding Hood, this is the story of Little Red Riding Hood.
In the kingdom of far-off places with mother and kitty cat lived Red Riding Hood, who the neighbors named after her red hat. One day her mommy called to her,
Hurry, for heaven's sake, and go to Granny in the woods and take her this basket of cake.
She put her crimson hat on. Her mommy had this to say,
Go straight along to Grandma's, let no one lead you astray.
So through the woods she rambled on, hop and a skip along. She sang to all the flowers and birds, sing this little song.
I'm off to see my grandmother who lies abed so ill. If anything can make her well, I bet these goodies will.
Just then, a big wolf stepped into the path right in front of Little Red Riding Hood.
Hello, little girl, and how are you? May I be of any service? I know these woods so very well. Shucks, I know where every curve is.
I'm on my way to Granny's house, my basket's full of cakes. So if you will excuse me, sir, I'll go for goodness sakes.
And the bad wolf, with a last look at the basket of goodies, went to a shortcut that he knew, and in 3 leaps was at Grandmother's house, where he tied up poor Granny and put her in the closet. And then, with a whish and a whoosh, he jumped into bed and pulled the covers up high. He'd no sooner covered himself when Red Riding Hood arrived.
Oh, Grandmother, what big eyes you have!
The better to see you with, my dear.
And Grandmother, what big ears you have!
The better to hear you with, my dear.
And oh, Grandmother, what big teeth you have!
The better to eat those goodies with, my dear.
And so saying, the wolf jumped out of bed. But as he did, his claws got caught in the sheets, which after all aren't made for wolves, and he got all tangled up and fell on his head, kerplunk. Red Riding Hood ran outside and called a woodsman who was working nearby, and while the woodsman tied the wolf up, Red Riding Hood let poor Granny out of the closet and helped her back to bed. And then they just sat there, waiting for a policeman to come and take the bad wolf off to jail. And while they were waiting, Granny opened the basket of goodies, and they ate and sang and sang and ate.
Crunch, crunch, we caught the fat old wolf. Crunch, crunch, this is good. Crunch, crunch, this story's at an end.
This was the story of Little Red Riding Hood.
Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there lived a king and queen who ruled their people with kindness and wisdom. They had everything they could wish for. A huge castle overlooking the kingdom, fine clothes, precious jewels, everything but what they wanted most, a child of their own. One morning, as the queen was taking her usual walk along the riverbank around the castle, she was startled to find a fish lying on the ground at her feet. It was gasping for breath, and, as you know, a fish can't live very long out of water.
Oh, you poor little fish. I must put you back into the river.
Whereupon she did. But as the good queen turned to walk away, she heard a voice behind her saying, "Your Majesty, you have saved my life. Tell me your dearest wish, and it shall be granted."
But I have everything. I am the queen.
"Everything, Your Majesty?"
Well, there is one thing. If only our kingdom could have a prince or a princess.
"Your Majesty, your kingdom shall have a princess, with the blooming of the first flower of spring." At that, the happy queen hurried back to the castle to tell the king, and together they awaited the coming of spring. Months passed, and finally the first spring flower bloomed, and sure enough, the glad news rang out from every tower in the castle. Hear ye, hear ye! This day to the kingdom a princess has been born. Well, the joyous king declared a holiday for all his people and gave orders for a great feast. He invited the lords and ladies of the castle and 11 of the 12 fairies in the kingdom. You see, the 12th was a wicked fairy and didn't deserve this honor. After the feast, the 11 fairies gathered round the newborn princess and blessed her with fine gifts, goodness, beauty, riches. Now all but one gift had been bestowed upon the princess, when suddenly the uninvited wicked fairy appeared.
Aha! I too have a gift for your new princess. On her 15th birthday, the princess shall prick her finger on a spindle and fall down dead.
With that, the wicked fairy vanished. Everyone was horror-struck. But wait, the fairy who had yet to give her gift spoke up.
I haven't the power to change the wicked fairy's wish completely, but I can save the princess from death. My gift shall be this. When Her Highness pricks her finger on the spindle, she will not really die, but fall asleep instead for 100 years.
Well, the king tried to save his little princess by ordering every spindle in the kingdom to be burned. Nevertheless, on the princess's 15th birthday, she was wandering alone through the castle when she came upon a lonely tower room. Inside, she saw a wrinkled old lady busily spinning. Of course, the princess didn't know that this was really the wicked fairy in disguise.
Good day. What are you doing? I'm spinning, Your Highness. See how merrily the wheel turns? Wouldn't you like to try it, Your Highness? Oh, yes, I would.
But the princess no more than touched the spindle when she pricked her finger and fell back into a deep, deep sleep. Then every living thing in the castle, every person, every dog and cat fell fast asleep. A great hedge of thorns grew up all around, so thick no one could penetrate it. and the story of the sleeping princess spread throughout the land. Now on the very day the 100 years were over, a handsome prince, curious to see if the legend was true, rode to the castle on his white steed. And as the prince approached the great gate, the thick, thorny hedge parted magically to let him pass. And as he walked through the castle, he found everyone still asleep after 100 years. At last he made his way to the little tower room, where he beheld the princess, so beautiful in her sleep that he knelt down to kiss her. And at his touch, the princess opened her eyes, and she smiled at him. And as they left the tower, everyone in the castle woke up and rejoiced. The prince and princess soon fell in love and were married. And then they lived happily together for the rest of their lives.
Pinocchio, Pinocchio, this is the story of Pinocchio. This is the story of a little boy, an old wood carver's pride and joy, a boy who was carved out of wood and who wasn't really very good. One day when Pinocchio went to school, along the way he stopped to fool. We know that isn't very smart, and it almost broke his father's heart. Pinocchio, Pinocchio, why are you bad, Pinocchio?
I'm not bad, I'm good, but I don't do as I should. And whosoever could, if their head were made of wood.
Pinocchio sold his little red coat. He acted like a billy goat, and for just 3 coins of gold, he was left out in the freezing cold.
Well, Pinocchio walked around in the cold until he became very, very sick. And a good blue fairy took him in and put him to bed and called the very best of doctors for him. First, there was Dr. Crow.
The puppet is quite thick, I think. He's hovering right on the brink. But if he's not sick, I tell, 'twould be a sign that he were well.
And then there was Dr. Owl.
The puppet is quite well, I think. I really think he's in the pink. But if he's not well right quick, I tell you that he's very sick.
And just then, a little cricket hopped into the room and said,
Don't pay attention to these two. Chirpy Cricket knows what to do. It's just that he's not very smart, and his papa's home with a broken heart.
So you see, Pinocchio was very sick because he'd been such a bad boy.
I'm not bad, I'm good, but I don't do as I should.
But whosoever could, if their head were made of wood. Pinocchio, Pinocchio, here's more about Pinocchio. More of the story of the little boy, the old wood carver's pride and joy, a boy who was carved out of wood and who wasn't really very good.
The next day, Pinocchio was walking down a road looking for his father who was lost. A big stagecoach full of little boys came by. They all seemed to be having such a good time that Pinocchio jumped on board. And lo and behold, he found himself in the land of boobies.
Oh, all I do is play and play. I play the whole day long, and everything is bright and gay, so nothing can go wrong.
But it did.
Hee-haw, hee-haw, my name is Pinocchio. Hee-haw, hee-haw, how it happened I don't know. Hee-haw, hee-haw, my ears just grow and grow. Hee-haw, hee-haw, I am a donkey.
Well, Pinocchio was sold, first to a circus, and then to a peddler. And when the peddler went to wash him, the pure ocean water changed him from a donkey back to a little puppet again. But before Pinocchio could say chirpy cricket, he was swallowed alive by a tremendous whale. And you can imagine his surprise when inside that whale he found his father, alive and healthy, cooking himself a catfish.
I'm here, my father, gonna rescue you. Back to our home I'm taking you. We'll build a raft and sail right out of this great big whale. Ready? Now, when I pull the whale's tonsil and he yells, you push the raft out of his mouth. Here we go!
And back home they went. And believe it or not, the very next day when Pinocchio woke up, he was no longer a puppet, but a real live boy.
Oh, he's not bad, he's good, and he can do as he should. For the good he could, 'cause his head's not made of wood.
For many years during the time of David, Saul and his people were at war with a cruel and godless nation called Philistines. One day a Philistine warrior showed himself above the ramparts. He was a tremendous man, a giant of a man. In fact, he was over 9 feet tall. The tip of his spear was a thick, massive beam, and its tip was of heaviest iron. And Goliath shouted a challenge to Saul's army.
Choose a man to fight me. If he kills me, we will be your slaves. But if I kill him, then you shall be our slaves and grovel before us.
For 40 days, Goliath repeated his challenge, and there was no one who dared fight him. But one day, David the shepherd boy came into the camp and heard Goliath, and heard the men speak in terror of him. And David asked to be taken to Saul's tent.
What is it you wish, David?
I want to fight the Philistine, Your Majesty.
You, David? But you can't. You're only a boy. Do you realize that if you failed, our people would be slaves?
Your Majesty, God once saved me from a lion. He will save us from this Philistine.
Very well, David. You may fight him if you wish.
And Saul put his own armor on David, a bronze helmet, a coat of mail, and his sword.
Your Majesty,
Yes, David.
I am grateful for your armor, Your Majesty, but it will do me no good,
Why not?
because it's so heavy I can't move.
Take it off then, David. Take it off. And may God be with you.
David took a stick in one hand and his sling in the other and walked toward the Philistine, toward the terrible Goliath. Goliath couldn't believe his eyes.
What am I? A puppy dog? That they send a child after me with a stick?
Yes, Goliath, you come at me with a sword and a spear, but I come at you in the name of God.
Come on, then, and I'll give your flesh to the birds and to the beasts.
The men of both armies rose and watched as Goliath drew nearer to David. And as David ran to meet him, he put a stone in his sling and shot it. The stone sank into Goliath's forehead where there was no armor, and Goliath fell to the earth, dead. Saul wept for joy, and the men of his armies filled the valley with their shouting, while the Philistines fled in terror.
Goldilocks went to play. She went to play in the woods one day. Soon she found she lost her way in the great big green, green forest.
All of a sudden, she came upon a little cottage. The door was open, so in she walked. It was the cutest little house that Goldilocks had ever seen. Looking about her, Goldilocks saw 3 bowls of porridge sitting on the table. She went up and tasted the first bowl, but it was much too hot. Then she tasted the next bowl. It was much too cold. When she tasted the last bowl, it was so delicious that she ate it all up. When she was finished, she went over and sat down in a great big chair. But it was too hard. Then she tried the next chair. But it was too soft. Then she tried the last little chair. But when she sat down, it broke all to pieces. Now Goldilocks went upstairs and saw 3 beds all in a row,
just as the dishes of porridge and the chairs had been. She tried the first bed, but no, it was too hard. She tried the second one, but it was much too soft. Then she tried the third bed, and before you could say Jack Robinson, little Goldilocks was fast asleep. Soon the owners of this cozy little cottage returned, singing happily,
We're so glad to be home, glad to be home, glad to be home. We're as glad to be home as any bears can be.
But as they looked around their precious little home, they noticed immediately that things were not as they had left them. Little Bear said,
Someone has been eating my porridge and has eaten it all up.
Then they saw that their chairs had been used, and Baby Bear cried,
Someone has sat in my chair and broken it all to pieces.
Then up the stairs went the bears, up, up, up. Step by step, up, up, up.
Who could have eaten the porridge and who could have sat on the chairs?
Once upstairs, Papa Bear shouted,
Who's been sleeping in my bed?
Mama Bear wept,
And who's been sleeping in my bed?
Baby Bear cried out,
Someone's been sleeping in my bed, and there she is right now.
This woke up Goldilocks, but the bears told her that everything would be fixed and to come back and visit them as often as she wanted to. Papa Bear told Goldilocks just how to get home so that she wouldn't get lost again. And as she skipped down the lane, they heard her singing,
I'm going home, I'm going home, I'm on my merry way. But I'll return to visit the three bears one fine day. Yes, she'll return to visit
the three bears one fine day. The merry men of Sherwood Forest, we're as happy as can be. We have lots of fun till day is done, as we sing so merrily, as we sing so merrily.
Many years ago, in the days of King Richard the Lion-Hearted, there lived in Nottingham, England, a man named Robin Hood and his band of merry outlaws. They lived in the forest and ate of the king's venison and drank October ale. If ever a stranger should pass through the forest, he would hear the merry men and Robin Hood singing off in the distance this jolly ditty.
We're the merry men of Sherwood Forest, we're as happy as can be. We have lots of fun till day is done, as we sing so merrily, as we sing so merrily.
But don't think that everything was always happy for Robin Hood. The mean and wicked sheriff of Nottingham was always plotting a way to capture Robin Hood and his band of merrymen. One day he hit upon a plan.
I'll have an archery contest,
said the sheriff.
Robin Hood will not be able to resist the chance of proving to everyone that he is the greatest of them all.
When word of the contest reached Robin Hood, he enrolled immediately. But wait, cried one of his merry men. If you go to Nottingham, the sheriff is sure to capture you. Ah, my good man, said Robin Hood, I will go in the disguise of a poor beggar, and I will win the contest and bring back the prize. On the day of the contest, the sheriff of Nottingham was singing with glee.
Robin Hood will soon be in the jailhouse. I will capture him and you will see. Robin Hood has tried for the last time to make a fool, to make a fool, to make a fool of me.
The sheriff said,
Aha, now we will know who is the greatest archer of them all. There are but two men left to compete, Ellsworth and that ragged beggar. Shoot, Ellsworth.
Ellsworth shot his arrow right into the middle of the bullseye.
There, you beggar, see if you can beat that,
shouted the sheriff. Robin Hood stepped up to the mark and confidently sent his arrow speeding to the target, splitting the arrow of Ellsworth in two. The crowds went wild. The sheriff knew that there was only one man in the whole land who could have accomplished such a great feat. Excitedly, he shouted to his men to seize that beggar. Robin Hood was prepared for this and had his men waiting to aid him. The sheriff and his men chased Robin Hood deeper and deeper into the forest, but by Robin Hood's shrewdness, he was able to capture the wicked sheriff. When news reached the king about what the wicked sheriff of Nottingham had done to Robin Hood and his merry men, he ordered that Robin Hood and his men were to be let alone and allowed to do as they pleased because of what they had done to help all the poor, unfortunate people of the land.
We're the merry men of Sherwood Forest. We're as happy as can be. We have lots of fun till day is done as we sing so merrily, as we sing so merrily.
Would you like to take a trip around the world? Then come along and travel with me on my magic carpet to see many fascinating sights in far-off lands. Hold on now as we soar out over the Hudson River, across New York Harbor with the Statue of Liberty. Hold on tight as our magic carpet whisks us clear across the Atlantic Ocean. And already we're passing over the English coastline. Listen very carefully, and you'll hear one of the grand marches used at the coronation, Pomp and Circumstance. And down there below us is the City of London. And there, look, the big clock they call Big Ben. And over there, Westminster Abbey. And as we look very closely, we'll see the changing of the guard. Look how straight the soldiers stand at attention. Now we're off again, over the choppy waters of the English Channel. And there's the French coastline. Over the rocky shore we go, over tiny farmhouses down below, to the beautiful city of Paris. Paris with its broad boulevards and the Eiffel Tower. And over there the beautiful Arch of Triumph, a monument to peace. Paris is not only a beautiful city, but the people of Paris are friendly and full of fun. What's that below us? Look, a group of boys and girls like yourself, dancing to Frère Jacques and Alouette. Listen. Hold on now as we complete the last half of our journey. We're flying faster now on our magic carpet. Look below, the Vienna woods in full bloom. Now we're over Vienna, and below the beautiful Prater Gardens on the banks of the blue Danube River, decorated with the loveliest red chestnuts you've ever seen. And what lovely lilacs and red roses. Don't they smell nice? Let's listen to the children's orchestra as the concertmaster leads them with his shiny baton. Beautiful music, the Blue Danube. But whoosh, we're off again, and already we're over another big city. See the water in the streets. Why, every street is a river. They're called canals. And those boats, well, they're gondolas. Everyone travels about on these canals in gondolas as you take a taxi. In fact, they can't walk anywhere because there's not even a sidewalk. It's all water. Yes, you've guessed the name by now. This is Venice, one of the most beautiful cities in all Europe. As we fly over Italy, we pass through Florence with its beautiful museums and tall churches, and Rome, the eternal city. And then to Naples and Sorrento. And the music we're listening to now is Come Back to Sorrento. I guess you know where we are now. Yes, boys and girls, we're back in America, flying over Atlanta, Birmingham, Dallas, and Fayetteville, such cities as Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, and Syracuse, over Los Angeles, Denver, Helena, and Cedar Rapids. We're back over the United States and back home again.
From sea to shine.